When I got into my actual car today after playing MudRunner VR, I was so grateful that tarmac and concrete roads exist, because while this game is fun, it's very demanding. I've only ever played SnowRunner of the Runner series because I think it was on PS Plus a while ago, and even though I did enjoy it, my favourite way to drive trucks and lorries is in VR with, say, Euro Truck Simulator. So when the news hit that MudRunner VR was officially coming to VR, I was massively hyped, and after playing around 8 hours of the campaign, I've came away with mixed but overall positive impressions. To be clear, this video is sponsored by the developers, asking for the game to be featured on the channel, so as always my thoughts are my own and my honesty has no price tag. If you do however want to buy MudRunner VR after this review, there is a tracker link in the description. MudRunner is a unique driving experience and not one I would say I'm best suited to. It requires patience and methodical thinking. You have to plan and potentially change the plan during each mission due to, say, falling rocks, trees and other impassable forces of nature. There is a story, but I personally didn't care about it too much, but every mission so far has been different and interesting. You can go from rescuing locals' trapped vehicles, broken down vehicles, picking up and delivering trailers, refueling and repairing broken down trucks, and more. And once I decided to stop using the realistic steering during the game, which is honestly a nightmare, and I'll explain why in the upcoming negatives, I started using the joystick to steer, and finally the game fell into place. This is a hard game full of physics. It's slow and requires your full attention, and is full of moments that will either make you laugh or cry. For example, on one mission I had to get to 3 outposts, survey the area and collect the data, and then finally deliver the data. I had a quick look at the map and figured this wouldn't be too bad, but I was so wrong. And it turned out this mission was really the make or break for me in the game. I was constantly getting stuck and having to use my winch cable, which I actually loved doing in the end by the way, while having to monitor vehicle damage due to using all-wheel drive in the worst terrain. For some reason this causes damage when you're under heavy steering, and then finally I had to also monitor my fuel. It all felt pretty stressful on my first attempt. At the second outpost, while surveying the area, I accidentally released the handbrake, and I was too slow and I reversed crashed into a tree, and it put me in a real predicament. I could start from that last checkpoint after doing the survey, which is my fault. I shouldn't have done the survey because that would have sent me back to the last area. I could try and push on from this point, but it meant basically the damage was so high that I couldn't really use all-wheel drive. And that would just make the game nearly impossible, or I could simply start the mission all over again. I did however try again, dreading the thought of going through everything I'd already been through for the last hour, but eventually I had to give in and restart. That was really the make or break moment for me. I started again due to having knowledge of upcoming hazards, and that gave me the ability to work out how better to steer and lessen damage in all-wheel drive. And this run went really well. And finally, I actually found the game really cool, and this led to me spending another 6 hours playing until writing down my impressions. I realised my mental approach was probably the biggest culprit here and was all wrong. And for those of you who play the series, you may have already figured out that was my problem in the beginning. This isn't a racing game, and there's no speed thrills to be had. These games are all about taking your time, driving excellence, patience, and vehicle management. That's when I learned to really enjoy it. Unfortunately, there is frustrations, and I feel it's definitely down to a lack of VR focused feedback that really stops this game from being amazing, and I hope the developers update the game from this feedback. First on the negative list is immersive steering, i.e. using your hands to grip the steering wheel is simply not a good way to play this game. You can't use 2 hands even though it looks like you are, and it often sends you in directions you don't want to go, hence what I said earlier about using the joysticks. Second on this list, you have to get out of your vehicle many times when you're playing this. I know I would say on average 3 out of 4 times out of 10 when you get back into the vehicle you'll be facing the wrong way, meaning you have to recenter a lot of the time when you get back in. This isn't a problem at first, but when you're struggling on a mission and you have to get in and out of the cab a lot, it simply does get old fast. Third on the list, you can't put your head out the windows, which is completely bizarre to me, as I know many drivers want to see how thick the mud is or how high the water is while crossing a river, or simply take a look at the trailer while you're reversing. The game does have mirrors and they do a good job, and they seem to be rendered at around 30 FPS, and I'm not complaining about them, I think they're really functional, but still, why can't we put our head out of the window? And lastly, the entire game is teleport movement only. This is a crushing blow for me personally. I do understand why we have teleport in the VR space, but for me and many other long-term users, it's probably the most unimmersive movement system in VR. Now, there is a lot of VR red flags, but I do promise you, if you can overlook these issues like I had, what you're left with is a pretty unique VR experience, which is thrilling, rewarding, and it looks great on Quest. There is also day and night cycles, and a free mode, which gives you pretty much unlimited replayability, as the missions get generated as you play. One minute you'll be scaring crows with your horn, and the next going around collecting pictures, on top of all the regular missions found in the story I mentioned earlier. So to summarise right now, there is no game like this in VR outside of PCVR, and I would still argue the driving experience is completely unique. It's actually a simulator. It gets a thumbs up from me, but please heed my warnings I mentioned earlier, and I really hope the developers listen to the feedback. If you do pick this game up, please remember to let others know your thoughts down in the comments, and I will see you on the next one.